Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Skye and today I'm going to be ranking my top 10 palettes of the year. This video was totally inspired by Annette's makeup corner here on YouTube. I love her ranking videos and all of her eyeshadow videos. Honestly, she is one of the eyeshadow palette queens of YouTube, incredibly underrated. Y'all need to watch her if you don't already. I was initially going to include all of these in my 2020 favorites video, which should be going up just after Christmas. However, I feel like if I talked about all of these palettes in that video, the video would be about 40 minutes long. So I figured that I would dedicate an entire video talking about my favourite palettes of the year and rank them while I'm at it. So yeah, if you are curious to hear my top favourite palettes of the year, then just keep on watching. I will say though that even if a palette is number 10, it's still one of my favourite palettes ever. Ranking these was a lot harder than I thought. So let's start off with number 10, and I'm starting off with the Oden's Eye Alva palette, the first one. It looks something like this. It's a neutral palette, but I really love the metallics in here. You can always see that they are so high shine and so glittery and intense. Some of them are even duochromy, which I quite like. The reason why this is in the number 10 spot is purely because the matte to shimmer ratio isn't my personal favourite. I like to have more mattes in a palette, however, I know some of y'all like more shimmers, so take that information with what you will. And also the fact that it is a neutral palette as well. Yes, there is a pop of yellow and there's these purple mauvey colours, but at the end of the day, all of the looks that you're going to do are quite neutral. And I do like a neutral moment here and there. I mean, if I'm going to wear neutrals, it's going to be something like this, like really light, soft, fairy-like, or something really dramatic and intense. But the metallics are absolutely stunning. I love Oden's Eye's metallic formula. It's so good, and their mattes are really good too. But also the fact that these mattes are mostly like purpley based, like purpley mauvey type colours, you don't really have much diversity with what you can put in the crease, essentially. I was initially going to rank this palette a lot higher in my list, however, as much as I love this palette, I can't put it further than 9th place, and that's the Kaleidos Makeup Sashimi City palette. This is the Futurism 7-1 if you're curious, and it looks something like this. Y'all know, if you follow me on Instagram, how much I scream, I don't even sing, I scream this palette's praises. This is my favourite neutral palette in my collection. I love these duochromes so much. Penthouse is my favourite metallic in my collection. Oh, that's a bit of a stretch though. I love this mustard shade. I'm so sorry that you can hear my cat scratching herself. This salmon shade is also really beautiful. Again, another reason why I wouldn't put it even further up is because this is a neutral palette, and these two mattes right here, they are quite similar. I must say there's not really much difference in them. I prefer this one though because it's darker, like slightly darker than this one, and if I'm gonna do something neutral, I want it to be dramatic. The formula is fantastic. I have a full in-depth review on this palette on my channel if you want to hear like my full thoughts about each and every shade and all that good stuff. But yeah, stunning palette, absolutely gorgeous. I love it. I love Sashimi City. Also, please do not play the drinking game. Drink every time I say I love something, because I love all of these palettes and I don't want you to make bad life decisions. Palette number 8 is the Shroud Cosmetics Creepy Cute palette. Now, you may be thinking, Skye, how could you put arguably the best pastel palette ever to exist in 8th place? What's wrong with you? I'll tell you why. I haven't used this that much. I can already tell that it's a favourite for me though, because when I have done a few more creative type looks, these mattes are just so pigmented. Like, they are pigmented. And they don't lose their colour either. Like, for an example, this shade right here called Take a Hint. It will look exactly this shade on your eyes. It will not lose any sort of its base colour. Because I find with some pastels, when you blend them out, they do lose, like, their tint to them. Does that make any sense? Like, you'll blend it out and it'll just turn into like a lightish grey, essentially. But these don't lose their pigmentation at all while blending, and they are just fantastic. The formula is so good, but I don't think I could put it any higher, purely because I've only used this palette a small handful of times, and even though I love the formula, there are palettes in this lineup that I've used a lot more, therefore I have more opinions on them. But yeah, I really adore the Creepy Cute palette. It is such a fantastic one. If you're looking for some really good quality pastels, I'd say the Creepy Cute is easily the best pastel palette ever. I do agree. It is so good and so fantastic. And even this black shade right here is so good, and the grey, oh, I love to see it. In 7th place, we have the Shroud Arcana palette. Oh my god, I didn't expect to love this palette as much as I did. I actually have a 3 looks 1 palette with this video coming pretty soon. I mean, I filmed it a few months ago at this point. I should really edit it now that I think about it. Funnily enough, this palette was more of an impulse purchase for me. I initially placed my order on Shroud to buy the Creepy Cute palette, and then I saw the Arcana and I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna buy it anyway. And I'm so happy that I did, because Shroud's formula for their mattes, one of my favourite matte formulas ever. They are so creamy and pigmented, easy to blend, all that good stuff. And this palette is so aesthetically pleasing because for every matte there's a metallic that matches it, and I just love that. This shade right here, Chalice, is my favourite shade in the palette. It is absolutely incredible. It's the most beautiful antique gold. But truly, if you're looking for a beautiful grungy palette, Arcana is probably one of the best options. I do have another grungy palette that I'm going to be talking about in this list. I feel like a lot of you can already guess. In 6th place, we have the Kaleidos Escape Pod palette. I went through an emotional roller coaster with this palette, it feels like. I did get this sent in PR as well as the Sashimi City, as well as that one. I was sent both of those in PR, and initially with this palette, in my review, I was quite harsh about it. I was saying, like, you know, I was really critical about it, and I will say, I still stand by my critiques, like this blue being absolutely shit. These two orangey corals look the same on the eyes, so I don't see why they're both in the palette, and this beige shade, why is it here? But the more that I've used it, the more that I learn to love and really appreciate it. Even though the matte formula in this isn't the same as Kaleidos' regular matte formula, it's still really good, and funnily enough, the matte purples in this palette are much better than the matte purples in Lunar Lavender. I'm sorry, it had to be said. But the metallics in here are the most beautiful high shine metallics. I'm so happy that they put a bunch of them in here. This shade right here called Cosmic Cabaret. This is so beautiful, and this shade right here, Saturnalia, oh, it's my favourite green metallic ever. The colour scheme is super unique, really beautiful. I believe this is actually limited edition, so if you're thinking about getting this palette, I recommend buying it as soon as possible. I'm not too sure if it's limited edition though, I could be wrong, I'm not gonna lie. But this is probably my favourite Kaleidos palette. Is it my favourite Kaleidos palette? I think it is. It's truly, truly beautiful. A lot of the time I like to dip into this palette as a companion palette because I love the metallics in here so much, and for that reason that's why it's in 6th place, because every time I use it I just get happy, and I love to it's just a good palette, you know. Now we're going to be talking about my top 5. Now, the top 5, I kept changing these around so often, and now I'm looking at this list and I'm like, okay, I want to swap that one with this. The top 5 was easily the hardest for me to decide, because the top 5, I feel like I love all of these palettes equally. Like, they equally all have my heart. However, I had to rank them somehow. So in 5th place, we have my Natasha Denona Love palette. I love this palette. I could easily put it in number 1. The only reason why I haven't is because as much as I love pink eyeshadow, you are pretty much limited with only doing a pink-based look. Obviously, it's a pink palette. But I had to be critical somehow. I had to, like, rank these somehow. But every time I want to wear pinks, this is the palette that I reach for. Ironically, I'm actually wearing pink eyeshadow today, but it's not this palette. It's actually a palette that I'm currently testing out, and hopefully you'll be able to see that in my low buy haul later this year. But my good friend Kat using makeup on Instagram, she got me this palette as a gift, and that's another reason why I love this palette, because it's a gift from a really close friend of mine, and I love Kat so much, and I feel like this just, like, encompasses our friendship. Not to be mushy, but I'm gonna be mushy. Also, I have to say that the mattes in this palette are so beautiful. Like, Natasha Denona's matte formula, at least in this palette, is phenomenal. Like, it blends itself, essentially. There are 2 cream to powder matte formulas right here, and I'm not the biggest fan of that formula. It's not my favourite, it's okay, but the metallics are beautiful. This one right here is like a duochrome. It's like a pink to gold. This one is like a purpley to blue. I love this palette so much. You can get so many beautiful looks with it, and it's such a sophisticated palette. Like, every time I wear this palette, I feel so beautiful. I highly recommend though catching this palette on sale because I do believe that £60, it's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for a makeup product, at least in my opinion, so I really highly recommend this palette when it's on sale. Or as a gift. It makes a really good gift. Palette number 4, again, this one and the Love palette could be interchanged depending on my mood, but I have to give it to the Lethal After Dark palette. Technically, this is a single shadow palette, but you can buy it as an all-in-one, so me personally, I like to count this as just one palette because I like to use it as one palette. I previously had this stored with the rest of my Lethal singles, and I just found that I missed this format, and I just love the colour story on this. This is 90s inspired, it reminds me of my childhood and all that good stuff. Lethal's matte formula is one of my favourite matte formulas ever. Is it my favourite? I think Lethal's matte formula is probably my #1 favourite matte formula ever. And even better, the metallics in this palette are really high shine. They're a little bit crumbly, I must say. They're not as intense as the Kaleidos and the Cleona metallic formula, but these metallics are the best metallics that Lethal has ever done, and I believe that they're sticking with this formula, which I really like to see. The shade Synth right here is one of my favourite colours ever. It's a purple to lavender, like high shine duochrome. It's incredible. I love this hot pink shade Caps Lock. It's incredible. Night Call right here is probably one of my favourite purples in my collection. Overall, Lethal did a fantastic job with this palette. I love using this all the time. It's just so fun. And the variety of looks you can get from this is endless, essentially, which is why I ranked it higher than the Love palette, because you can get more variety with this palette. Palette number 3 is a fairly new palette to my collection, so maybe this one would be maybe shuffled about a bit more after I use it a bit more, but honestly, I have to say that this is number 3. I can't put this down. Genuinely, and it's the Lunar Beauty Moonspell palette. I bought this on a whim when I was having probably one of the worst mental health slumps of my entire life. I'm not kidding, it was really fucking bad. So I thought I had a 10% off voucher, so I used it on this, and even though it was kind of like a spontaneous purchase, I had been wanting this palette like for a year since it launched. The packaging is the best packaging in my collection. Like, this is fantastic. You have to hold it in your hands to realize how special it is. It really does look exactly like a book, and it's really high quality. The mirror is massive, and as we can see, the shadows on the inside, I'm gonna try and hold this so I don't like blind you. The mattes in here, just fantastic. They're very comparable to Lethal's mattes in my opinion. I love that it's organized in a purple row, a neutral row, and a green row. I love these greens paired with the purples. It's such a beautiful color scheme. You can see how much I've used it because it's so dirty, this palette. This shade Prue right here is almost a dupe for Cleona Glazed, which is one of my favorite single shadows ever, or one of my favorite eyeshadows in itself. Although this one has a bit more of a grey base to it, which I really do like. It makes it so different and unique. These purples are so effortless and beautiful. This one right here, Sabrina, is also really good. You do have to be a bit careful working with Sabrina though. Like, you can't blend it too much, otherwise it may turn a little bit patchy, but you can make it work. I even like these neutrals in here. Like this shade Winifred, it's kind of like super messy because I've used it quite a lot. It takes a lot for me to be impressed by a neutral brown, and this one really takes the cake. I love these greens up here so much. Bonnie is one of the most beautiful, unique caca colours. I love it. If I had to give any critiques of this palette, I would say that I don't like the shades Hermione, Fiona, and Piper, purely because they're metallics, but they're not like the high shine metallics like these shades right here. And Prue as well. They're more of like a subtle metallic, which you could use it as like a crease colour and whatnot. They're more like a satin, and I don't like satin eyeshadows, so that's my only critique of this palette. Truly, Moonspell is one of my favourite purchases of the year. It's just so special to me. It's so special. Now we're moving on to palette number 2. You may be shocked that this is in second place. A lot of you would have said, this is Skye's #1 palette, and it got beat out slightly. Just slightly. But palette number 2 is my Sugar Pill Fun Size palette. I know it's not #1. Shocking. This was my first palette purchase of the year back in January. I actually broke my eyeshadow palette no-buy in the beginning of the year for this palette, And again, I was going through a really bad patch. Apparently, whenever I go through a rough time, I buy palettes, and those palettes end up being my favorites. Take that information with what you will. But this is the perfect pastel neon palette. You can make these more pastel, you can make them more bright and neon-ish. I love them so much. I will say that these two shades down here, High Score and Continue, they do get hard pan in them sometimes if you swatch them, so don't swatch this palette too often because otherwise you will get hard pan. You can scrape it off, but that's just a little warning for y'all. But I love these colours so much. They're so fun and bright, and I have created so many looks with this. And even when I'm not using this palette, I usually reach into it as a companion palette to other palettes. The only reason why this one isn't number one is because that there are no metallics in this palette. I feel like if this shade Level Up was replaced with a beautiful like high shine duochrome iridescent shade, I feel like this could be number one, but now that I'm thinking about it, I really think that this is number one as well. I don't know, this one is tied with my number one spot. And my number one spot, I feel like this is kind of a shock to me. I mean, it's not really a shock because I love this palette so much, and it's the Oden Alva 2 palette. Oh my gosh, I love this palette. I was debating putting this one in second place because there are two pressed glitters in this palette, which essentially ruined the palette for me, but I can't lie that the love affair I have with this palette is so real. This is easily the best palette release of 2020. Actually, there's been quite a lot of good ones, but this is one of the best palette releases of the year. I love these colours so much. They're so bright and fun. These matte shades are absolutely stunning. There's so many textures in this palette. Like, this one is a bit more of a satin shade, but it's a bit more of like an intense satin, so you could use it as a lid shade if you didn't want something super high shine. This metallic blue, oh my gosh, it's incredible. My favourite colours in this palette are definitely these two greens. These are my favourite shades of green, and this metallic green, oh, it is stunning. I do have a 3 Looks 1 palette with this palette up on my channel already, and I believe I have a 3 Looks 1 palette video with this one as well, the Lethal After Dark. I just love it. I feel like a little fairy every time I wear it, and that's my favourite aesthetic. Like, Oden's Eye as a brand, if I came out with a makeup brand, it would be Oden's Eye, essentially. I will say though that if these pressed glitters were their high shine metallic formula, it would easily be the best palette, like the best of the best, but they did have to fuck it up a little bit. But yeah, I'd say that Sugar Pill Fun Size and the Oden's Eye Alva 2 are my tied for number one spot. I just can't pick between the two. But that is it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you liked hearing my thoughts and my favourite palettes of the year. Do let me know what are some of your favourite palettes of the year and all of that good stuff. Leave them down in the comments below. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just rambling at this point. I haven't filmed a video in like a week, so I feel like I'm a little bit out of practice. Full details of this makeup look should already be on Instagram, which is Beauty by Skye right here. Do follow me on there if you want to see more makeup content from me. Yes, this lash right here is popping off a little bit. No, I can't be bothered to fix it. You can also follow me on my other social media. I have a personal Instagram, I live stream on Twitch sometimes, and my Twitter are all linked down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I'd love to have you here. We talk about a lot of indie makeup and all of that good stuff, sparkly shadows. I specialize in indie eyeshadows especially, like that's my sweet spot in life. And if that sounds like your type of thing, then please subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you here. And as always, stay safe, wash your hands, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye!